Hello everyone, my name is Mateusz Stopczanski and today I'm joined by the Mateusz and Momchil Kotev, and we would like to highlight the full playthrough of the tutorial bit we did for our project A Coven of Cards. So let's jump into the game.
When starting the tutorial level of A Coven of Cards, the player finds themselves in a camp set up by their fellow witches, one of which we see instantly. This is Nyx, one of two witches tasked with aiding the player on this journey. She begins with urging you to go and talk to Cassandra, your other fellow witch. Upon entering the house, the player is introduced to the rest of the characters that will be taking part in this quest. First you meet Amos Bailey, the father of this quaint little family. He, once again, much like Nyx, urges you to go and talk to Cassandra so that you can help his family. Next, you find yourself talking to Cassandra on how to help Evelyn, a mother that has just given birth and is in critical condition, and her newborn son Luke, who similarly finds himself hard of breathing. Once you talk to Cassandra, you begin the first part of your quest, as she asks you to go out and gather herbs in order to brew a minor health potion. Going out into the wild, you search for generic herbs that can be found in abundance. The player would benefit from grabbing more than the base required amount, but this is not necessary. Your goal is to bring them back to Cassandra, so that she can then inform you that you will need water in the cauldron and a fire in order to start to brew potions. In A Coven of Cards, crafting has meaning and is complex, so most recipes require multiple components and little mechanics that help you brew the potions. One thing to note is that even if the player forgets on how to brew the potions, the player can go back to Cassandra or Nyx in order to get the information again. The information isn't explicitly told to the player. For example, they aren't told to grab water and to grab wood and to craft it into coal. However, this is implied through the wording used by Cassandra. For example, she tells the player that they need to start the boiling cauldron.
So after collecting all of the regions needed for this part of the quest, the player will be introduced to the crafting. The first station he will be introduced to is a cauldron, and in the cauldron he will create the base potions for the quests. And in the future iteration of the games, we will implement the systems that will introduce the player to the mechanics step by step, without the explicitly explaining what the player needs to put, to facilitate the micro text which we mentioned in our documentation. So the first recipe the player will be introduced to is to create a simple coal. And he will do it by just grabbing the wood and putting this in the fire region and then transforming this into the coal. He will then repeat this action twice to get the coal needed for the further recipe, which is a bit more complicated, and is the recipe for the mineral potion, which takes 2 simple herbs, a coal, and then the flask of the water. After crafting 2 of them, they will be able to progress into the story.
Bringing the minor health potions back to Cassandra, you find that they are ineffective and ask to go and talk to Nyx about what to do from here. You see, Evelyn and Luke are in far worse condition than you imagined, and you guys have gotten here just a little bit too late for minor health potions to be working. Nyx is the witch that we first spoke to, the one in the camp. Returning to her, she informs the player that they can strengthen the minor health potions using regions only found in the dreamscape. This being a realm that the player can access during the witching hours of 3 to 7 AM, when the sheen of reality slips and the esoteric begins to seep in. She makes a note that it's better to save one than absolutely nobody, because the player can go for gold, but what I'll mention is that the dreamscape puts the player on a timer in order to facilitate meaningful actions and dialogue that will actually impact the world. Before entering the dreamscape, however, the player is required to get a reading from the tarot table. This introduces the Sabbath mechanic.
The game begins with you drawing 5 cards and placing them in your hand. At the beginning of each turn you will draw 1 card, and then a minor arcana card is drawn. These all have different effects, which range from drawing cards to moving around on the board or moving things on the board around. So for our first card, it is the King of Pentacles, which will allow us to pick one Major Arcana card on the board and uncover it. And then we may look in the deck of cards for 2 regents required in its completion. So I will uncover this card, which is the Wheel of Fortune, which has a King, Queen, Jack of Clubs requirement. So what I can do now is I can pick up our deck and search through for 2 of these regents. And now the system has had its turn, so to speak. We may now begin our actions. We will move one to the right, or for our first action on the first turn, and uncover the Devil, which has a King, Queen, Jack of Diamonds cost. We don't have too much to do here, so we'll move again to uncover the Tower card, which is a King, Jack, Jack of Clubs, and we'll just keep moving for now, uncover up, see what the board has in store for us. So that's our third action. That is the Hierophant, with a King, Queen, Queen of Diamonds cost. For our last action, we'll move one last time and uncover the High Priestess, which has a Queen, Queen, Queen of Hearts cost. Now that was it for our first turn. We'll move on to turn 2. So we draw one playing card, which is the 6 of Spades, and a Minor Arcana card is drawn. This is the Queen of Cups, which is powerful since it allows us to draw 5 cards. We can sacrifice 2 cards to draw 3. So these will go into our new graveyard, and we can draw 3 cards, where we get a 5, 6, and a 7. We will now play a combo. Since we have 3 consecutive cards, we'll send those to the graveyard, and that will allow us to draw a Minor Arcana card, which is the Ace of Cups. This allows us to look at the top 4 Minor Arcana cards, decide to put 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom of the deck. I will put these like that, 2 at the bottom, and then one of these cards is dealt, which is the 6 of Pentacles. I can look at the graveyard and choose 3 cards from it. Luckily we only have 3 in there, and I can, well, we have more than that, so I'll take these, choose 3 cards, put 2 on the top and 1 in the hand. And now we are back in control. So as our next action, we will move over 1, so that will be our third, and we will find the Moon card with a King, Jack, Jack of Hearts cost. Now at the moment we don't have anything that we can buy, but that will change fairly soon enough. For our last action, we'll uncover this last card, cementing our path from the Fool to the World by uncovering the Strength card, which has a King, King, Jack of Clubs cost. Now we go on to the third turn. So now it is the player's turn for action. I will spend these cards that I've just picked up. The King, King, Jack of Clubs to capture the Strength card, which we will use a dice to indicate. What I will do now is I will use a match 3 combo. So I have 3 2s of any suit. What this allows me to do is do a scry of 5 cards, which is an MTG term for this. I get to look at the top 5 cards of the deck, and I get to put them on the top or bottom as I see fit. And I get to draw one of these cards afterwards. I'll put these on the top, these on the bottom, and I will draw one. Which happens to be the 9 of Cups, which allows us to look for 2 Major Regent cards from the deck and add them to our hand. Either we find an extra Jack of Clubs for the Tower card at the bottom, which I do believe is at the bottom of the graveyard actually, so we won't find it in here. And I think that's the only Jack card that we are 1 Regent off. So what we can do is summon the wild card, which is the Joker. The Joker is a special card, it's a wild card of course. The Joker, when it is seen for the first time, it allows you to search through the graveyard and pick out any card from the graveyard and put it back into your hand. And the special thing about the Joker is it doesn't go to the graveyard, it gets shuffled right back into the deck. Okay, we're in business now. Back to the player actions. What I will do now is to use an action to reset the graveyard. I'll sacrifice my entire hand to shuffle the graveyard into the deck and draw 5 cards. This is to stop the player from getting stuck anywhere. So if they don't have a hand they want, they can just sacrifice it all and get cards back and continue playing on. So, sacrifice hand. And get 5 back. What do we get? We get 2 regents, very good. And 2 extra cards. As our last action, on the 13th turn, we have not only created a path from the Fool to the World, we have captured, let's see, 3, 6, 9 Major Arcana.
After completing the Sabbath, player will collect some of the Major Arcana cards which he can use to enhance his character in the game, and this is being done in the Tarot inventory, which, as is explained in the documentation, there is a slots representing the different parts of the character, and the player is able to drag them freely to enhance his player character. After introducing this, the player will be encouraged to go and explore the forest during the Sabbath, during the witching hours, and gather needed regions.
You are prompted to go to the forest, and you are not prompted on where to go in the forest. The forest is constructed of many sub-areas. This is to encourage exploration. There are also some isometric camera tricks which point you to areas that you could see but not get to encourage you to look around to find more. This is the castle area, which has some enemies at the front.
So at the moment of this build, the combat mechanic is not completely introduced. However, we put this as a placeholder to show where there's going to be the hit maps for the combat, and the player will be encouraged to fight with the enemies with various loot table and the various chances. In this case, we see that the player get both of the items from the first encounter, which not always going to be a case.
So you follow the castle area down to this slightly flooded area, and you'll find your first regent, which is the water lilies.
And then if the player will want to proceed, or he will be chased by the time, he will just return to the camp. But moreover, if he will have more time, he could explore a bit more to get the second missing herbal regent to save the other part of the other person as well.
So deep in the coniferous forest, which is designed to be more enclosed and more winding, you'll find the nightcaps, which is your other regent.
And afterwards, the player will be chased by the time to quickly return to the camp before the end of the Sabbath. And
It's important to remember that once the player enters the dreamscape, they are on a timer. Player actions, as with dialogue, choices matter, and select regents combinations are needed in order to help the mother and her son. So the player cannot just go out and grab any of the regents, they need specific combinations. Once they return to Nyx, she tells them to strengthen the regents using the alembic, but the player is told that they will need a minor health potion in order to strengthen it.
So in this case, we will again introduce the crafting mechanic in the cauldron to reinforce the player understanding of the crafting. So the player will be asked again to create the potions, which again will get him back to getting the generating herbs, water, and the wood for the coal. Which hopefully is going to make the player be more proficient with the mechanics in the further parts of the game, as this will reinforce this behavior of just creating the simple regions to create more complex one. So first, before going back to Alchemy Alembic, the player will go back to the cauldron, create the potions in order to straighten them. First, you will need to create the coal.
As mentioned before, the cauldron will have its own mechanics due to it being a more complex crafting system in which the player will actually be able to brew the potions and set the speed for the brewing process to their own input. If they brew too fast, the regents themselves could burn and nothing could come out of it. Or maybe it will take far too long for them to actually be able to brew the potions. Here we return to the alembic, in which we can strengthen.
In a very similar way as in the cauldron, with a difference that we have an extra regent for the potion itself that we would like to straighten. So by taking our mineral potion and then getting fire regent, we can put different regents in the responsible slots and then create strengthened potion. In this case, we were able to gather both of the all of the regents, so we are able to strengthen both of the potions to save both of the characters.
Now that they have strengthened the health potion, or potions, they must administer them to the correct person. Remember, choices matter, and the player is free to make whatever choices they wish. So deciding to not help out at all is a viable option, and will not be met with a failed state, but rather a whole new narrative. Here the player goes to the critical condition people, the mother and her son, and is asked whether they want to help or not. Now they can choose not to help, but considering they have potions, they should help. Whatever the case, they find themselves in the epilogue of this series, in which they are met with differing dialogue, depending on if they were able to save the mother and her son or not.
Which takes us to the conclusion of this bit of the gameplay, as at this part there will be a Inquisition coming and chasing the witches, which will start the actual part of the future game, which will be creating and named A Coven of Cards. Thank you very much for joining us for today. and hope you enjoyed it.